Hi, everybody, and welcome to this EuropeActive Wednesday webinar, Rethinking for Reopening and Recovery and Renewal in these exciting times. I'm Dave Stalker, the president of EuropeActive, and these are, I believe, these webinars will give operators and suppliers out there just a great insight into what is happening from out in the field from some of the best operators and leading operators through Europe. These webinars are brought to you by EuropeActive's President's Council, and as you can see from the logos there, that represents some of the biggest players throughout the European sector, and would be impossible without the support of the CEOs and those groups to make this possible. We have two sets of President's Council, this for operators and one for suppliers. Both are crucial in providing the webinars. So I welcome you all to this. I think it's going to be a fantastic webinar. In fact, I know it'll be a fantastic webinar. I'm going to hand over to Herman Rutgers, who, as all of you will, I imagine, know Herman, but will moderate this panel, is an ambassador for EuropeActive, and we can all sit back, listen, learn, and get our questions forward to the panel. Herman, over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, dear EuropeActive friends. Last year, when we were confronted with the lockdown for the first time, we organized a series of webinars with top CEOs to share experiences and learnings, as this is all new for us to be in a lockdown in our industry anyhow. And with the reopening of our sector happening now, thank goodness, underway in a number of countries, we thought it would be very good to do this again. And I'm very happy and honored to have today two top CEOs present live in this live webinar with us today. Sondre Gravir, CEO of SATS, the leading operator in the 4 Nordic countries, and Humphrey Cobbold, the CEO of the PureGym Group with clubs in the UK, Denmark, and Switzerland. We've asked our presenters to reflect a bit on 2020, how that ended, and what are the experiences in the first trimester of this year so far, and give us a glimpse of the future as well. As this is a live webinar, we will save time after the presentations for the audience to ask questions. So please use the Q&A function of Zoom for that, and then I will pick out the questions and pass them on to whoever is appropriate to answer those questions. By the way, this webinar will be recorded so people can view it afterwards on the EuropeActive YouTube channel. So that's enough from me. I would like to pass the parole and the screen over to Humphrey Cobbold for the next 20 or so minutes. Humphrey, the screen and mic is all yours.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you very much, Herman. Let me see if I can pick up my my presentation. You know, there we are. Let's see if that'll come up okay. And do that, and we should be pretty much okay when I get us back to the beginning. Well, listen, thank you very much, everybody. I want to answer the question to some degree of quo vadis, where are we going to here? And to know where you're going to, I think it's always important, you know, to start with what I've called here a brief history of time, the recent past and the present. But we're all more interested, I think, in the future. I suspect most of you, like me, will regard 2020 and early 2021 as a time we'd like to forget, not one that we want to remember. But I do think it's important to take the sense of context in that. But I'll talk a fair bit about our thoughts about looking to the future with some themes that we're holding closely within the PureGym Group as we look to the future. Let me start with this picture, which I title 2020-21, How to Lose £150 Million. That's nearly 200 million euros in 18 months. This has been an extraordinarily painful period for us and for most of you, I imagine, as well, in our industry. And this picture illustrates why, and I know Sondre will pick up on a sort of similar view with a stronger Scandinavian outlook. and it's been like this across Europe. We've been closed for 51% of trading days from March 1 until where we stand around May 9th, I think this date is up until, and you can see how that's been spread out across the different countries in the UK, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and also our businesses in Denmark and Switzerland. This has been a very tough period, and I've given you a sort of trace of the EBITDA form in January and February last year. We were doing fantastically. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, lockdown 1. We saw some good recovery in August, September and October, and then into the very tough period from November through till March, April. We're in the relatively fortunate position that as we stand today, all our clubs are back open. I know that is not consistent across Europe in any way, shape or form. So you'll probably regard me as somewhat fortunate today, and we recognize that. But it has been an extremely challenging period. And indeed, when you think about those challenges, I think about them in terms of the stakeholders that we've had to take care of through this very challenging period. And there've really been 4 sets of those that have been a massive draw on my time and my team's time. And let me just talk through a few things that we've done in each of those areas. First and foremost, in the top left-hand corner of this page, the well-being of our colleagues and looking after them has been right at the top of our agenda. We have 7,000 people in our group across Europe, 3,000 in the UK and 4,000 across Denmark and Switzerland, making sure that we've got good engagement with them, that we're giving them emotional support. This has been an incredibly tough time for people who've been furloughed for long periods of time. And I think all of you will have seen that in your teams as well. We invested a lot of effort in maintaining a sense of dialogue with colleagues. That wasn't always easy. That wasn't always easy. I think somebody's not on mute. Herman, that may be you. You may want to go on mute. That wasn't always easy because legal requirements meant that we couldn't email people through work emails, and we didn't have complete personal email addresses to keep up with people. So there were some real challenges in all of that. We put learning and development in place with people. We've had a mantra that's about trying to make the positive that we can out of the pandemic. And we provided extra financial support in some cases. And there I have to call out our financial sponsor and partner, Leonard Green and Partners, actually gave us a substantial amount of money from their own personal sources to help with a hardship fund for people who found themselves with difficult financial situations to deal with. So we spent a lot of time on our colleague well-being, and that's been paid back well. We've seen very strong return rates in terms of employees across our entire business, and we're very grateful for that. Secondly, on the top right-hand side of this page, we've had to look after banks, investors, and bondholders. This graph is the price of our bonds. We have over £800 million of bonds issued on publicly traded markets. When your bond price drops from 100 down to around 60, bond investors are not very happy. Let's put it that way. And we've had a pretty tough climb from there back actually to around 100 again as we stand now. We've had to manage that situation very carefully. In the bottom left-hand side of this page, I'd never done this before, but I ended up spending a disproportionate amount of time on television, on radio, and talking to journalists, really resetting the view that government and authorities had not just of our business, but more importantly of our sector. We naively believed that everybody understood that we provide an essential service to people. It became clear in the early stages of pandemic, they didn't understand that, and they saw us as a threat in the pandemic, not a part of the solution. And I personally spent a lot of time in trying to correct those views in the UK market and encouraging my colleagues in Denmark and in Switzerland to do the same. And then finally, and last but not least, in the bottom right-hand corner, I've given you a screenshot there of a cartoon that was done by one of my colleagues of our Zoom meetings. And yeah, this is how I saw my management team for much of last year and how they saw me. And actually dealing with some of the sensitivities and the challenges in my management team across the UK and across Europe. We were forming a new group as this went on as well, was in itself a tremendous challenge. And I have to say my colleagues at the senior management level right across the group rose to the challenge magnificently, but lots of stakeholder management across the whole business. But how's the reopening been? And here I want to share with you some statistics that for those of you who aren't reopening, I hope opening yet and are looking forward, I hope gives some hope for the future. Let me describe this picture to you, starting in the top left-hand side here. This shows the starting position when we member base versus 2019, the last unaffected period. We started from a worse position after lockdown 3 in April when we reopened, and this is for our English clubs because they've been open for longest. We started with 66% at the end of March and then 70% by the date we reopened in April versus 75% at the end of the lockdown 1 in July last year. So we started from a worse position, but what's been great to see on the top right hand side of this page is that the recovery in demand has been stronger. In April to May, we've seen our membership, our paying base grow from 70% of 2019 to 80% over the first 4 weeks of trading versus just a 4 percentage point increase in the first 4 weeks of trading in the last recovery from lockdown. People come back a bit more confident, and we've seen joiners on the far right hand side of this top right hand corner at about the double the level of joiners per club per day versus the period after lockdown 1. So that's some good progress there. In the bottom left hand corner, we've seen what we call hesitancy reduce in our members. So the number of members frozen in the English clubs was 8%. In August 2020, it's 3% as we stand today. So we see that as an indication of hesitancy, and it's taken us just 14 days to grow our like-for-like paying base by 5 percentage points relative to 2019 versus 30 days after lockdown 1. So we see that as a healthy indicator of underlying demand. And finally, in terms of the mix of members, we're seeing a pretty healthy mix, actually a better mix than I was expecting across the age groups in 2021 after lockdown 3 versus 2019, and a healthy mix, or indeed a very consistent mix between new joiners and ex-members and rejoiners within our clubs. So there's, I think, grounds for hope in the future from those. And we've seen similar trends actually across the rest of the UK. It's still early days, but we're seeing good progression in both Denmark and in Switzerland. In terms of activity levels, we've seen even, I think, better news in many ways. Looking on the left-hand side of this page, I think the level of activity in terms of number of member visits versus May 2019 as we stand in the week from 3rd to 9th of May 2021. So although we've got fewer members, actually those members we've got are using our facilities more, as we can see on the right-hand side of this page, where we're getting 1.43 visits per member per week versus 1.21 in May 2019 and 0.95 in August 2020 after lockdown 1. So underlying this, what I'm interpreting from it is a strong underlying sense of demand in the market for the products and services that we provide. And I don't think we're an outlier here in the UK. I think the UK in general has seen a good response. Obviously, we're helped in the UK by a strong vaccine program. That means that confidence is returning to people perhaps more quickly than in some areas of Europe. But all of you in Europe will get to the same level of vaccination that we've got to. It may take a little bit longer, but I think it's good to see that as a leading indicator of a return of confidence and demand being good for the future. So that's what I've called the brief history of time and the recent past and presents. And I'd summarize that by saying a really tough period, but there are some grounds for confidence as we look to the future, albeit we've all got a lot of work to do to get our membership numbers up and get people into that future. But let's be honest, it's a hard time to be a gym and fitness operator. As we look to the future, we're facing challenges that we all know about, from Peloton, things that have always been there, such as going for a run outside or working out in the park, where people are saying, I'd rather do this in the fresh air. And of course, as we know, the sales of home gym equipment have been much stronger than they've ever been before, and lots of people have equipped themselves with an amount of equipment at home. And we ask ourselves, or find ourselves asking ourselves the question, are we dinosaurs, facing extinction, or are we, in fact, as we'd like to believe, the saviors of humanity, part of the solution, part of the way in which we get people fit and well again? And I think that's a very important sort of existential question to not take for granted that we're there. But I hope that what I can provide you with is a sense of grounds for hope for the future. I've already done some of that through the data that I've shared. I know some of you still feel it's pretty dark out there, and I understand that feeling. I've got incredible empathy with that feeling. And there is a sense, however, that it's always darkest before the dawn. And I'd like to present sort of 4 points and talk those through with you. A sense that rising tides lift all boats. Just to show that we Brits haven't entirely departed Europe. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. A little bit of French there for you. I want to talk about the sharing economy briefly and why I think that's very important as a concept for us as a sector. And one final view that as things get more complicated, and they are getting more complicated, the more I think there is value in simplification. Let me talk about the first of those. What do I mean by this rising tide? Well, I genuinely believe that there will be billions and billions of extra hours of activity and fitness in the years ahead than more than there would have been. This is because everybody knows the pandemic has been about health and well-being. And I view this as our pandemic dividend as an industry providing products that are about activity and fitness. And I still believe that great products at a great price in the right place will continue to hold or gain market share. And that market is going to be bigger because there are going to be more hours of activity done. But, and it's a really important but for all of us, in a market with more choice, in every market I've seen that has more choice come into it, that's at home, on screen, Peloton, Mirror, boutiques on every street corner, etc., etc. Every one of us in the operational landscape has to re-earn the right to survive and thrive. And to do that, the economics of your proposition, of our proposition, must be robust enough to maintain and indeed in some areas increase investment in order to retain appeal for members, old and new. But I do believe that that rising tide can lift all the boats in our industry if we take advantage of it correctly. On the theme of plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, the more things change, the more they are the same. One of the striking things as we've researched members coming back to us after lockdown 1, and we're just beginning to do this after lockdown 3, is the things that have always mattered to people still matter. They just matter more than they did before. So at one level, things have not changed that much. Convenience, availability, access, timeliness of being able to go to facilities and facilities in the right place for people are still very important. That's why we're keeping our gyms open 24 hours overwhelmingly in the UK, and long opening hours in Denmark and Switzerland as well, even though that costs us some money. We are maintaining our rollout process. We're launching new formats that are smaller and more convenient for people in different markets so that we can service people. That's going to continue to be really important. Value for money, especially with some economic challenges out there, will be very important for people. And of course, we all know that cleanliness and hygiene has raced up the importance curve for people. And while that was always important, it is going to be even more important in the future. And so we've built a whole program around a model called Train Safe that is about providing the sort of safety and security that people feel that they want from a gym and fitness provider. And of course, in the bottom right-hand corner, the quality and the offer that we provide people is going to have to earn its right to survive versus home gym equipment, Peloton, and other options that people have out there. So we have to redouble our efforts on the fundamentals of what we're providing people. Of that, we're quite clear. But also think about the nature of our proposition in what I call the sharing economy, which is talked about a lot out there, but often not talked about that much in relevance to gyms. And I think that's a real shame. I think this is a great opportunity for us. We know that Zipcar in the UK is the biggest provider of shared cars. We all know about Airbnb, which is about borrowing somebody else's room or place. If you're a photographer and you want a 600mm telephoto lens that costs €2,500, you're much better off renting that for the weekend when you want it than you are buying it new, i.e. sharing it with somebody else. And parking sharing operations are cropping up all over the place across Europe. And you've all got examples like this in your own markets of sharing of clothes, of sharing of cars, and sharing of equipment. That's a part of what's happening across the economy. It turns out that gyms were early into the sharing economy. What we do fundamentally is we give our members the opportunity to rent equipment from us for 10 to 15 hours per month. Many of our members, when they come to us, will use £10,000 to £25,000 worth of equipment, Olympic lifting platforms, some plate-loaded equipment, a treadmill, an exercise bike, a functional rig, whatever it may be. Sort of level of equipment they can never replicate in their own homes. And they get the benefits of a social environment in which to use that equipment, guidance if they require it. So we are, in many ways, the prototype and the archetype of the sharing economy. And that underpins why our model works so well, because we all know in the industry that a variety of access to equipment and exercise allows you to maintain a healthy activity habit that you don't get bored of quickly. And that's why our facilities are so powerful, for people. So keep that in mind. And we keep that in mind all the time as we're sort of marketing our offer to people and making it clear why we continue to have a profound right to exist. On to the sort of final point I wanted to make, and I've drawn this graphic from the work that Deloitte have done and is shared frequently in the European Health and Fitness report that comes out each year. We operate in an increasingly complicated ecosystem. There are bits and pieces that are appearing new and old areas being refreshed across the whole of the health and fitness and activity ecosystem. And that is a complicated arena. And one of the things that we're trying to do as we respond to that and think about how we extend our services and what we're doing from a PureGym perspective is we try to keep things as simple as we can. And it was Albert Einstein who's reputed to have said that everything should be made as simple as it can be, but no simpler. And I think our members, customers out there, want us to help them by simplifying life as well as offering more. And sometimes the more can complicate things too much. So we think hard in terms of product, single, many gyms, gym access, paying as you go, making it as simple as possible in terms of accessing the product, keeping price as clear and transparent as possible and offering people the chance to choose, making the channel through which people purchase and how they operate as straightforward as possible. And online is how people want to do much of what they want to do now and buy from us. And we're increasingly trying to personalize as much as we can. And so we're investing in AI and the approach to doing that, although it's still early days. And we have to automate processes because you can't run manual processes at the scale of organization that we're getting to, which is back to about 1.6 million members in the group currently, and certainly building back towards 2 million over the coming weeks and months, I hope. So final point is about keeping things simple as we respond to the complexity in the marketplace. And so let me leave you with sort of two comments to summarize looking forward from two people for whom I've just got enormous respect for what they did in their lives. Firstly, Professor Stephen Hawking, the renowned cosmologist. I had the privilege of studying at the college in which Professor Hawking was a fellow and a teacher, an extraordinary individual for what he achieved in his life. And he had a great expression that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. And I think never has that been more important for us in our industry than currently. And secondly, the legendary, truly legendary chief executive, Andy Grove, who really created the company that is Intel today. He had an expression around success breeding complacency and complacency breeding or being a prelude to failure, and a sense that only the paranoid survive. And indeed, the title of his sort of management-oriented autobiography is Only the Paranoid Survive. And I constantly challenge my team and myself to be what I call healthily paranoid about what's going to happen next and how are we going to deal with that. Many of our organizations have been successful, and we have to be very careful to make sure that that success does not become complacency over time. And I think Andy's exhortation to make sure that we remain paranoid, and never has that been more appropriate than it is today as we come out of this pandemic and we face the challenges of the future. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope this has been helpful. It's one man and one business's journey through what's gone on, and I wish all of you every success in the months ahead as well.
Thank you very much, Humphrey, for a thoughtful and inspiring presentation. I'm sure there will be questions. I'd like to ask Carlos or David to open the question Q&A function now on the Zoom, because I think it hasn't been enabled yet. And with that, I will come back to the questions after the next presentation from Sondre, all the way from Oslo. Sondre, again, the mic and screen is all yours.
Thank you, Herman, and thank you, Humphrey, for a very interesting presentation. I have, as you know, tons of respect for what you have done throughout the pandemic with PureGym, and deeply impressed. And you know, you have been one of the thought leaders of our industry in our discussions over the last year throughout the pandemic. So big thank you for that. And I really think, you know, it's interesting how you're introducing the sharing economy as a way of thinking of our industry, and I think it's highly relevant and something that we should build upon as an industry, and not only from PureGym side. And then moving back to the Nordic countries. There are many similarities, as you commented on, Herman, in the introduction, and you, Humphrey, in your presentation. There are many similarities, especially I recognize myself when you talked about stakeholder management, Humphrey, and I think that they're all of you also listening into this webinar probably recognize a lot, especially the part around taking care of your employees and members. So I will give you a brief introduction of SATS. I will talk a little bit about how the pandemic has treated the Nordic countries, and also look a little bit ahead. Just briefly on SATS, we are in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. We are the #1 operator in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, and then we are competing very well and hard with Humphrey and his team, with Fitness World being the market leader in Denmark. We entered into the pandemic March last year. We were around 700,000 members. We closed the first quarter this year with 600,000 members. So we've also lost our bunch of memberships. This is due to, of course, lacking sales in the closed clubs, not so much increased churn or fall off. We haven't seen that increasing actually at all. And you said in your presentation, Humphrey, how to lose 150 million pounds in 18 months. And our numbers are somewhat smaller, but still we have lost. We estimate our, so to say, EBITDA loss from the pandemic to be around 60 million euro plus. And then we have been lucky to operate in 2 of our 4 countries, Denmark and Norway, which have also pretty good governmental subsidy packages in place. So we've received in total 20 million euro in governmental subsidies in these 2 countries throughout the pandemic. So that's, so to say, the high level numbers. And then when it comes to the Nordic, the situation has been very different in the different countries throughout the pandemic. And I think, you know, there's maybe across Europe, and maybe for many of you listening, there's maybe, you know, this notion of an impression that, you know, Nordics has been open all the time. That's really not been the case. So basically we have, if we start with Norway, our biggest market, we have the majority of our clubs are still closed in Norway, and they have been so since beginning of November, 100% closed. And then we have some small areas of Norway that has been, you know, off and on open, but with very heavy restrictions. And we really expect and hope, based on the dialogue with the governments, that we will be able to reopen Norway towards now the end of May, beginning of June. And then in Sweden, and I think Sweden has been the country that has, taken somewhat a different approach to handling the pandemic from a governmental point of view. So there, all our clubs have been open. We closed our clubs the first 2 weeks of the pandemic on our own initiative. It turns out that we were the only one closing our clubs. So then we had to reopen again because all our competitors gave a very big discount to SATS members having closed clubs. So we reopened our clubs with new operational routines. But all the way in Sweden, governmental restrictions have been pretty heavy. So even though we have been operating with open clubs, Sweden is the country where we have the lowest available capacity in our clubs due to very strict governmental restrictions on number of people in the clubs, which is the same as for, so to say, other retail businesses. And then in Denmark, as PureGym and Humphrey knows very well, it's been off and on. It's been 2 closing periods, and we opened Thursday 13 days ago, which was great for the Danes, and the development, as Humphrey indicated, has been great in terms of returning members and people getting active again. And then in Finland, fitness clubs are in general open at the moment, but operating with pretty strict restrictions. And then, as Humphrey also commented on for PureGym, it's always interesting when you are in a difficult situation, like all operators globally in the fitness industry have been. When you live of gathering people together, it's of course challenging with the pandemic. And I think what has been very important for us, and still is to really, try to differentiate between the actions you need to take as a company to handle the crisis you are in and to handle the pandemic short term, but then also be very open to and humble to the changes that will come as a result of the pandemic. And just to start off with, so to say, my finishing comment for this presentation is that I think these changes will be very positive for our industry, because there are so much new demand that will come into our industry. And then, of course, we all have to be on top of our toes to make sure that we are the ones serving this demand, as Humphrey said, with the right product at the right price, at the right place, etc. But the demand will be there. So it's basically up to us as operators and as an industry to make sure that we listen to our customers and really provide the products they need in order to stay healthy and happy. And in terms of the focus we have had throughout the pandemic, we have had a very clear focus, as Humphrey commented on, of course, also on employee engagement and communicating with all our employees being temporarily laid off and all our headquarter employees working at the home offices ever since March last year. But we have also had chosen deliberately to have a very active dialogue with our members. And this is a choice you can make, because many operators I know have, with good arguments, made a different choice, that make sure to be as silent as possible, freeze the memberships, be as silent as possible to avoid awakening sleeping members and make sure that they don't cancel their memberships. But we have chosen the opposite strategy, and time will show if that was a smart thing to do. But we have been very proactive in communication with our members, making sure to keep them updated on the regulatory changes, making sure to help them stay active and to use our digital products to so to say continue to be top of mind brand-wise, with SATS in their minds, ready to open up again. And then, of course, we have, as all operators, taking very immediate and very forceful, I would say, actions to reduce cash burn. So we have been managing this situation of limited revenues in periods. At the same time, you have, of course, all the house rental costs and all of the costs running. And I think, for operators operating in a market where you have governmental subsidies, it has been nearly impossible to strike deals with the lessors on how to reduce rent, because that's one of the cost items you get partly covered. So we have been working, of course, strong to reduce cash burn. but then at the same time position ourselves, but also, as I said, what we believe is a positive thing for the whole industry, for the growth to come, both by standardizing our operating model to make sure that when we come out of the pandemic, we operate more efficient, we operate more standardized with a lower cost base. SATS has been pretty, so to say, slow on the club expansion historically. We have only opened like a few clubs, maybe 2 clubs per year or something. Now we're stepping that up significantly, and we have invested more over the last 12 months in our digital offering than ever before. And I think to be able to have this dual focus in mind is extremely important. And Humphrey made a big point around simplicity, and I totally agree to that. At the same time, I think, you know, it's important for our industry, or you can choose different paths, so to say, but I think it's important for our industry to, with the perspective that demand will continue, demand will be strong, demand for health, living a healthy lifestyle will be stronger than ever, and also the willingness to invest in your own personal health is stronger than ever. So we have chosen to actively, so to say, broaden our product portfolio to make sure that we cover, so to say, a holistic way of being able to stay, according to our vision, to stay healthy and happy as a member, both when it comes to training, but also when it comes to nutrition, and to really, so to say, expand the product offering. And then Humphrey had fantastically motivating and interesting graphs on the comeback after being opened for several weeks in the UK. We don't have the same type of graphs yet because we haven't opened, especially our biggest market, Norway, that has been closed, and we just have a few days of operating in Denmark. But we see some clear indications of the same. We have opened some small clusters, and when we have done that now after the 3rd wave of closure, we see exactly the same as PureGym showed, a more rapid comeback of members, both in terms of visits, in terms of new sales, and in terms of really reactivating the whole member base. But as I said, these are only for very small club clusters to start with. So I really, really do hope that we and all of the industry across Europe and all of you listening in will see the same impressive figures that we saw from PureGym. That is, you know, really motivating to see, and it's fantastic for our members that can then stay active again. But as I said, early indications from our openings really indicate the same, both on visits, sales, and member activation, which is super important. And again, we believe that we as operators are able to really affect how this comeback will be. And we, as I said, we have deliberately chosen to stay very active with member communication throughout the closure. And we are very active now when we reopen our clubs in having a very segmented communications with our members. The vast majority of our members actively use our app. So that's a very good communication channel for us to be active on app pushes. We also use SMS and email, of course. And based on, so to say, your training history before the pandemic, and also the early, so to say, sign of your new training history after reopening up, we take them into different, so to say, member communication journeys. And if after opening in Oslo in hopefully a few weeks, if you haven't been to one of our gyms within the first 14 days, you will get very tired of us, because then we will be on you every day, every morning, every night. And we have done many pilots on this in our short reopenings. For example, you know, sending SMS to a group of members late evening saying, you know, remember to pack your bag before you go to the office tomorrow morning, or remember to go to the gym. And then the new SMS the next morning and said, you know, we know you're on the way out now. Have you remembered to pack your bag as we reminded you yesterday evening, etc. But seriously, be very close on with the member communication. And some people hate it, we know, but the vast majority really loves it. And it's really reactivating the member base. So we use a lot of digital communication, so to say, and also introducing a loyalty reward program based on activity, etc., to really re-engage the base. And then, as I said, we're expanding, ramping up our club expansion. We're opening 30 new clubs now in 2020 and 2021. Usually we open, as I said, 2 to 3 maybe per year. So this is quite a significant step up. Again, focusing on our existing clusters mainly to make sure that of course, we recruit new members. But as important, this is of course improving the product offering to our existing members. And remember, this is we already, with the density, in Oslo, there's not that many people. It's a small European city, 500,000-600,000 people. We have 69 clubs, and we're opening many new clubs in Oslo. So we're really increasing the density of clubs. And then, as I said, I think it's important to take a clear choice if you really want to expand your product offering, or if you want to, stay in the core of what you have, and then do that very, very good. We have decided to expand our product offering, and then I think you have to do it, with a high speed, both introducing new group products. We're launching paddle courts, which is, big in the south of Europe, but it has not been big in the Nordics up until recently. We're after a quite successful pilot on physiotherapy in our clubs, and with the good collaboration between the physiotherapists and the personal trainers, we see some very interesting synergies there. So we are expanding that offering now quite rapidly, and also launching, new nutrition products, clothing products, etc. And that's really, building up the whole product offering. And then lastly, I think you really have to, as an operator, invest in technology now. And you have to make a choice if you also want to be, so to say, in the forefront of giving digital training products, or if you only want to use technology to improve the efficiency in operations and in, so to say, the personalization of your offering. We have chosen to do both. Again, I think you could do, it's a deliberate choice you have to make as an operator. You can choose only to use technology really in improving the efficiency and quality in your physical operations, which I also think is an interesting line. But we have really chosen to expand our digital product offering. And we have saw a 400% increase, starting from a pretty strong base, actually going into the pandemic, in the use of our digital products throughout last year. And we'll continue to expand the offering. And we're also launching, Peloton has not launched in the Nordics yet. But we are launching our own home training service now over the summer. We have it now we have launched the MVP. We have 100 test homes across the Nordics now testing these products, and it's super exciting to get all the product feedback on how to improve the products with the fitness screen, starting with the launch of a connected fitness screen. And it's truly amazing to see how the product is used, and to see new type of user patterns, to reach new type of users that we're not reaching with our physical gyms, but also to have a complementary offering to our existing members. So I think, this is a completely new space for us, which will be super interesting to follow over the next couple of months and years, to learn how to use really connected fitness in people's home. So I just want to round off with saying that, I believe the pandemic has really strengthened the mega trend we have seen in all across Europe, also before the pandemic, around, living a healthy lifestyle. And this has really been strengthened throughout the pandemic. Remember, there's still the vast majority in the Nordics. Fitness club penetration is around 21%. So there's still, 80% of the population not being member or paying for a fitness club access. These penetration numbers are lower in some other European countries. So already before the pandemic, we had a lot of potential demand, and this has been strengthened throughout the pandemic. And I believe that as a fitness operator, we are really in the core of the health and wellness economy. And you can deliberately choose how far into, so to say, the different circles you want to expand. And it makes a lot of sense to only stay in the core, or to, very focused expand. But I really believe that we have a strong role to play in the recovery of the health and fitness market in Europe. We have a strong role to play. Our job has never been more important in helping the European population get back to activity. You all have seen numbers from your own country on how much inactivity has increased throughout the pandemic. So I think, we should go into this with a deep respect of the changes that the pandemic has brought in terms of changed training habits, etc., increased competition. At the same time, be very optimistic on behalf of our industry and the demand out there. And it's just up to us to deliver great products to help our members get back in activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sondre, for another upbeat and very optimistic presentation that should give all our viewers, let's say, the idea and the conviction that we will get out of this tunnel. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and there's not a train coming towards us. It's really light for the day of our industry. I've seen one question from Gins from the Latvian Fitness Association. He's asking, do you have special programs for members who have had COVID-19? And do you work with doctors on that? Humphrey or Sondre, do you have an answer to that question? Do you work with doctors, and do you have special programs for ex-COVID-19 patients?
Sondre, do you want to respond first?
I can start. No, we don't. We haven't developed specific programs, but we have looked into how we can train selected personal trainers on the topic in terms of helping members with, long-term COVID-19 symptoms to recover and get back to activity in a supported way. But we don't have, so to say, a communicated program on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and look, where we are is we've been a bit focused on recovery and reopening just for the last few weeks and getting back together. But we have actually had ongoing discussions with the National Health Service in the UK. We've got obviously a very large health service in the UK about how we can make our capacity and resources available to prescription by doctors, support for all a whole series of forms of recovery and rehabilitation training, just one of which may be post-COVID or long COVID like symptoms. There are many others as well. That, as those who've looked at that will know, is quite challenging because you get into all sorts of situations relating to healthcare procurement, which is a highly regulated market. So it is challenging to construct something of that sort of nature, but we're certainly interested in doing that. And I think those discussions will start happening again more now we're reopened. And I'm certainly looking forward to getting into those. I'm cautious in terms of the role that we can play because of the regulatory environment and challenges that poses, but it's certainly a discussion that we'll be having.
Yeah, thank you. Here's a question from John Young. Hi, John, good to see you're on participating in this. He's asking whether one of you, Sondre or Humphrey, have monetized the digital membership and to what success?
I'll pick that one up first, Sondre, and then you can go on. Look, we already had a reasonable digital offer, pre-pandemic. Clearly, it wasn't strong enough for the pandemic, so we invested very substantially, built up to 400 exercise classes, live feeds, training programs for at-home activity within about 6 weeks of the pandemic happening. Being quite open, we tried to charge for that. We asked people to pay for it. The take-up was very low. The feedback on it was, it's great, but I can get most of this for free on YouTube, to be honest, or in some other way. And we actually took the decision to make all of that content, all of that capacity available to people for free. Not just our members or former members, but actually it was available to anybody who downloaded the app in the UK. We thought that was a positive engagement tool. It was more valuable to us in that, much like Sondre said, that they've taken a proactive approach to engaging with members. We decided the revenue opportunity in the immediate future was relatively low, but the engagement opportunity was massively significant. And I think that stood us in very good stead with our members. So that's the route we went on that. It is very difficult making money out of those services on a standalone basis when there are 10,000 kettlebell exercises online on YouTube and huge amounts of free content out there on not just YouTube, but on the Sky TV platform and on equivalent platforms across Europe as well. But we're still working on that for the future.
Thank you, Sondre.
Yeah, I'll just basically copy what Humphrey said. Totally support it, and we tried the same and made the same conclusion after a few short period that the engagement we create by opening this up is much more important and valuable in the long term. But this is an interesting strategic question: how to crack that code to really make money on digital training, because there's so much. Let us not underestimate also the fantastic quality of all the available free content out there. And of course, our members, they really they appreciate to do, so to say, a SATS class digitally with a SATS trainer and with things they're used to. They really appreciate to do that digitally, and they have that a part of the membership. But if you're not a member, there's so much free great content out there. So we have to crack this code as an industry, but we have not done that yet.
Maybe a comment from my side on that same topic. We've all seen Apple Fitness Plus coming onto the market, where they're charging, I think it's $5 per month for streamed fitness content. And in the US, some of the operators are adding that to their membership. So it's part of their membership, and then you get the Apple. Would you like to comment on that strategy? Is that something that you see as interesting for the industry?
Listen, I think it's very interesting. We're certainly looking at commercial partnerships. We think our fundamental role in things is we've got distribution, if you like. We've got a large member base. In our case, that's growing towards 2 million people. We can develop content as well, but we've actually already been partnering with providers of third-party content to distribute that as part of our app offering. And certainly as we take this forward, we'd expect both our own content produced by ourselves and partnerships, whether it's with Apple or one of the other providers. There are many out there. We will see, but of course that's always subject to commercial arrangements with the third party. And last time I tried it, negotiating a deal with Apple wasn't particularly easy or lucrative. They're not renowned for being generous to people who distribute their products. Let's put it that way.
Look at how hard the time the European Union has in getting grips to Apple in terms of their commission strategy. So that's a whole different ballgame. And I have a question here.
Just a comment. Just a comment on the same topic, Herman, because I think also we as an industry, I think it's super interesting to work with the commercial partnerships on content. But I think, from my personal view, I think one of the strategic strongholds you have to remain is to have the end-to-end member dialogue and data and relationship with you as an operator. If you give that away, you have started down the journey that you don't want to go.
Yeah, no, I agree. A question from Richard Gainsborough. How can we explain the difference in gym membership percentage rates in Norway versus others? Is it influenced by government policy or commercial drivers? Sondre, clearly a question for you.
Yeah, I think there's several factors, but number one, low cost has been around for a while in the Nordics, and the penetration of low cost came earlier. So the price point in the Nordic fitness market is pretty low compared to many European countries, especially taking into account the purchasing power in the society. So a low-cost membership in the Nordics, and we are operating the biggest low-cost chain under a different brand in Norway, but this goes across the whole Nordics. The low-cost membership would typically be the same as you see in Europe, less than 20 euro a month. And then full-service operators like SATS still are priced at around 50 to 60 euro a month. So we're not at a 100+ euro a month level. So I think that has, combined with the purchasing power in the society, combined with the Nordic population being pretty active, also outside fitness, being active outdoor, etc. This in combination has resulted in pretty high fitness penetration, and it's been so. It's been above the European average for the last decades, not only the last year.
I think there is one other important factor as well, and that is I think in Norway there's no VAT on gym memberships, and Denmark certainly there's a subsidy. So when you look at headline prices, and we look at this obviously closely when we compare Denmark, for example, where there's a partial subsidy in the UK, the operator keeps 20% more of the revenue than is the case in other European markets. And that if you think about it, allows a greater level of investment for any given pricing level in the market. And I think that has been part of the And by the way, I think that is the correct policy for governments to follow. Clearly, I would say that, wouldn't I? I'm still, find it astonishing that more governments across Europe don't either zero or lower rate the value-added tax and sales tax for a health and fitness sort of provision. That's still bizarre, I think, but that is the way it is. And I think that helps the Nordic countries in particular.
I think, Humphrey, on that point, we all have a great lobbying opportunity there in nationally and at the European level to lobby for lower VAT rates.
Of course, one of the few advantages I can see now able to separate the VAT decisions that the UK government makes from the restrictions that, for good reason, the European Union has in place on VAT zero rating and things. I suspect that's one of the reasons that Norway's been able to do it as well. But
when you do the lobbying, please make sure to not remind Nordic politicians that they can make more money here. So
we won't do that, Sondre. Martin Seibold, our good friend from Germany, has a question here on pricing. Do you see the market discounting more than usual by giving time away to test at the beginning, reduce upfront payments? What is your strategy? Would you like to go first, Sondre, on that?
Sure. Long term, I don't see prices coming. To be clear on that, I don't see increased price pressure. To be honest, I think with the right products, we should be able to both keep and potentially raise prices compared to where we are across our markets, especially in the Nordics. And then we are, of course, doing some campaigning when we open up to make sure that we get focus on the fact that we are reopening. But I think, as operators, we should be really, we should put the value to our products and be clear that, we have a great product, which is great for our people, as long as we have the right price point. We should not, discount that too much. And in SATS, we haven't, if you look historically, we have not given, long-term discounts, etc., over the last couple of years. And will not do so going forward. But of course, when we reopen, we have some opening campaigns, but those are pretty short term.
Humphrey, what's your point on that?
Well, rather annoyingly, I find myself agreeing with Sondre again. I did our update to our bond investors this morning, and I spoke at some length about outlook for an approach to pricing in our markets in that, because it's such an important value driver. So that's on record. We take a very careful approach to promotional activity, tailoring and targeting it, carefully. Indeed, when we reopened our gyms in England, we took the decision in the first week or so to do very little promotion. We reasoned that the first 100,000 or so members were going to come back to us anyway. So let's let them come back without giving away joining fee and other incentives, because we didn't need to. And then we took a staggered approach, carefully changed across the estate to target the gyms that needed filling up versus those that were already pretty full in terms of members and very active. So my argument to participants in the industry is to be sophisticated and careful and considered in the use of promotion and to capture value for our products that we've invested so carefully to make, exactly as Sondre said. I do, looking to the future, see that as demand will be strong as normalization levels off after the pandemic, and there will be a bit of supply restriction because some operators won't make it to the other side. I do believe that there will be opportunities, carefully and cautiously, to capture a little bit more value from consumers who, when you take my example of the sharing economy, are paying, in some cases, a couple of euros for an hour and a half, 2 hour workout. I mean, you can't buy half a pint of beer in the UK or a thimbleful of beer in Denmark for a couple of euros. So I think we're offering pretty good value to people on that basis.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question for Katharina Lester for Humphrey, and I'm not sure you can answer this question, Humphrey, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. Would you be willing to share a bit on your personalization artificial intelligence strategy?
Katharina, it's a good question. The quick answer is no, not at the moment, because it genuinely still is in the early stages of formulation. I'm not being crafty in that, but it's too early because it really is just coming together. We think automating and managing responses and interaction with members across very large numbers, we think that technology has a role to play in that, but it's still early days in it. and we're hopeful that it can have a good positive impact, but too early to talk about it at any length, I'm afraid to say.
Okay. Last question here, and I'll ask it first to Sondre, is on outdoor training. How successful are outdoor trainings, and what type of trainings do you do? Do you conduct them near clubs or in the parks, etc.? Sondre, I think you've done a significant amount of outdoor. What is your answer to that question?
Yeah, we've done a lot of outdoor in Norway and Sweden, not so much in Finland and Denmark of different regulatory reasons. But what we are doing, we're doing group classes. We're not doing, so to say, we have not invested in a lot of outdoor equipment. So we do basically individual training, taking the studio training out there. But we are doing a lot of outdoor classes. We have done that ever since March last year, and it's been super important. And in many areas, for example, now currently in Oslo, for example, or in Norway in general, where all the clubs are closed, we're doing a lot of outdoor classes to make sure we have a product to offer our members, and actually that we're doing for free. So they're not paying anything, we're just doing it to have an offer for them to stay active. And when we open the clubs, like we have in Sweden, we will continue to run a lot of outdoor classes. And it's everything from cross training and yoga next to the club or in the park, or running classes in the forest. So there's a lot of different combinations.
Thank you. Humphrey, any comments on the outdoor?
Overall, across the group, we've done relatively little of that. In fact, for the reasons really that Sondre cites, that from a regulatory point of view, it can get quite difficult. I mean, and it was prohibited actually in the UK until the end of March, in fact, in this particular lockdown. So that constrains things quite seriously. Actually, our personal trainers have done quite a lot of one-on-one training that was allowed outside. And so we've allowed them and actually helped them develop relationships, both for online training and face-to-face safe outdoor training in that sort of sense. But it just wasn't practical in our markets to manage that at any sort of scale. We looked at it quite seriously, but we couldn't see a way to making it work that wasn't about making money at all. It was just whether we could make it work in a way that was suitable for members, and the restrictions were actually a little bit too difficult. So we had to focus on the digital channels and in-home activity based on the app in that case.
Thank you. That concludes the presentations and the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Sondre and Humphrey. Fantastic job. I hand over to David Stalker for some final comments.
I thank you very much, Herman, and a huge thank you to both Humphrey and Sondre for taking time, and great presentations. Always great to hear what's practically happening on the ground, and tying back to EuropeActive's manifesto, those key words of health, digital, standards, community, and it actually coming to life in what I hear is happening at your sites and in your communities. And also fantastic to hear the creativity that is going on at these sites as they set the pace. Obviously, as always, Herman, thank you for chairing the panel and bring it together. If we can go to the last slide. So the next one of these webinars is on June the 9th, and joined by Rennie Moos from Basic Fit and Gabriel Sayers from GoFit to talk about their part of the journey. And I'm sure everybody who has joined this webinar will join that one. It really is fantastic, and this President's Council, the people who have joined this to make it possible and to make it happen, and EuropeActive, both the organization but in the wider sphere of the operators of Europe, are hugely grateful to that. So we look forward to seeing people on the June the 9th. Thanks very much to everybody here today. Thanks to the speakers. Thanks to Herman. And we all crack on driving this industry forward. Best of luck. It's exciting. Thank you very much, Herman.